Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of the hour. US President Donald Trump has exempt Hungary from sanctions on Russian oil and gas for 1 year, calling its energy dependence unique. The move, confirmed by the White House, marks a major win for Prime Minister Viktor Orban amid disagreements with the European Union on immigration policies. Meanwhile, a Russian drone attack on the Ukrainian city of Dnipro has killed 1 person and injured 10, including 2 children. Several floors of a residential building were destroyed as firefighters continue rescue operations at the scene. US President Donald Trump says no American officials will attend this year's G20 summit in South Africa, claiming white farmers face genocide. Pretoria rejects the allegation, calling it a false and dangerous distortion of reality. Iran's embassy in Mexico rejects US and Israeli claims it planned to assassinate Israel's ambassador in Mexico City. Tehran calls on the allegation a big lie aimed at damaging relations between Iran and Mexico. North Korea's defense minister, No Kwang-chol, warns of more offensive action after a missile test and condemns US-South Korea security talks. Seoul and Washington call the launch destabilizing amid new US sanctions on North Korean entities. The Israeli army says the Red Cross has taken custody of a hostage's body from Gaza under the current ceasefire deal. The remains are being transferred to Israeli troops following coordination with Hamas and humanitarian officials. Israel denounces Turkey's arrest warrants for genocide against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other officials. Foreign Minister Gideon Saar calls the move a PR stunt by President Erdogan after 37 warrants were issued over the Gaza war. A US district judge has ruled that President Donald Trump illegally deployed National Guard troops to Portland to suppress protests. The decision bars future use of military force in US cities to police civil unrest. Let's start in Europe with our first story, and Ukraine is facing a fresh wave of Russian attacks targeting its energy infrastructure. Kyiv's energy minister confirmed massive strikes that caused emergency power outages across several regions. And authorities say drones also hit an energy facility in Odessa, though no casualties were reported. Now in Kharkiv, 5 people were also injured in another Russian airstrike. Ukraine warns that these repeated assaults threaten the country's heating supply as winter approaches. Energy Minister Svitlana Gunchuk vowed that despite Russia's attacks, Ukraine will have light and heat this winter. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia is massing around 600 troops near Vovchansk in northeastern Ukraine. Zelensky also reported that Russian forces lost 25,000 soldiers in October, many from drone strikes, underscoring the escalating toll of the ongoing war. Let's take a listen in to the Ukrainian president.
Вовчанськ. Вважаємо, що ситуація напружена і може ускладнюватись через те, що йде накопичення русських бойовиків. Їх накопичення за цю добу 600. І тому Росії дуже важливо зробити все, щоб реально захопити Покровськ. В будь-якому форматі показувати успіх на полі бою, чи то йти на Вовчанськ, чи то ще щось зробити. Їм потрібно показати успіх. Тоді вони зможуть повертати, спробувати повернути цей наратив. Що ми ж вам казали, що...
Joining us now is Professor Veselin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Law School, and he joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Professor Popovsky, for joining us here on NewsX World. Ukraine's power infrastructure has been hit once again by Russian strikes. What is Russia's goal here, to cripple the energy grid or to break Ukrainian morale ahead of these encroaching winter months?
Yes, you're absolutely right, Thomas. These are the goals. The winter is approaching, and the Russian strategy is to inflict as much damage as possible on the energy infrastructure in order to have those electricity cuts and to make it colder for the Ukrainians to live during the winter. But more important are the results of it. And we hear 2 hours later, all the electricity and power were restored. So effectively, using so much power to stop for 2 hours the electricity, if that's what Russia is happy that it achieves now. But it also shows that Ukrainians have a much better defense systems against those drones that may hit electricity infrastructure. Yes, we see this for all 3 years. Every time when the winter is approaching, Russians are increasing attacks on energy infrastructure. But if the first winter was very harsh, and I'm speaking to Ukrainians in Kiev and Kharkiv every day, they say today they are much more optimistic. And Minister Gonchak, she also mentions that it will be okay, that there won't be major problems with electricity over this winter, meaning that Russia has very little options left. And I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Yes, apologies for interrupting. Professor Popovsky, the winter in Russia and Ukraine has been weaponized before, of course, throughout history. We saw it, of course, famously in the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa. How can the biting weather in the Eastern European winter be weaponized, particularly on the front line as we approach those months?
I think, Thomas, the warfare today is much different from 85 years ago when Barbarossa started. It's very much hits by rockets, by drones. What Russia can do is exactly to hit some electricity. They are not advancing at all on the battlefield. For months and months, we hear basically the same news, that they captured Pokrovsk. And they said this 7-8 times, and it's still a fight in Pokrovsk, meaning that Russia is not going anywhere. If we take the historical Barbarossa type of advance, there is absolutely nothing like this happening in Ukraine. The winter is coming, but the modern technology and the modern equipment make soldiers actually very prepared to fight during the winter as well. They have all the new way of equipment for that. In fact, some military strategies say that in the winter is better because the worst time is in the spring when you have a lot of water, and in a firm ground, it's much easier to advance, which is the winter firm ground. Again, already those factors, winter, summer, don't play much role when the modern warfare is very much drones, very much intelligence, very much different from what it used to be.
Yes, Professor Popovsky, do stay with us. We have some diplomatic updates related to the conflict. And President Trump has expressed his optimism about the end of the war in Ukraine, saying the hostilities will cease in the not-too-distant future. Speaking about the issue at a meeting with members of the press following his meeting with the Hungarian President Viktor Orbán, President Trump said that sometimes people fight it out a little longer, but it won't be long before the war ends. Let's take a listen into the statements he made.
Agree that the war is going to end. Sometimes people have to fight it out a little bit longer, but I think we agree that the war is going to end in the not-too-distant future. Do you want to talk about that, Victor?
I have some ideas, and I will present it to the president. How to stop it.
Now, in that same meeting, Donald Trump, of course, met with his Hungarian counterpart, Viktor Orbán, and has reportedly agreed to exempt the Eastern European nation from participating in US-led embargoes on Russian oil and gas for a period of 1 year, owing to Hungary's situation as a landlocked country and the lack of access to other major sources of oil and natural gases. According to sources in the White House, Hungary has also committed to purchasing American LNG worth around $600 million. And President Trump has said that the US is looking at the possibility of the exemptions and that the situation is difficult for Hungary. He also voiced his support for Hungary in its disagreement with the European Union, saying that he backs Orbán's policies on immigration. Let's take a listen in once again to the president's statements.
We're looking at it because it's very difficult for him to get the oil and gas from other areas. As you know, they don't have the advantage of having sea. It's a great country. It's a big country, but they don't have sea. They don't have the ports.
Meanwhile, after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that Russian oil cannot be allowed to be sold in Europe as negotiations commenced to secure energy solutions for Hungary amid the sanctions placed on Russian energy products by the European Union and the United States. Joining us once again is Professor Popovsky. Of course, we know that the Hungarian leader is a huge fan of Trump, a huge ally to Trump. Do you see this more as a political favor, Professor Popovsky? And what are the implications of it?
Yes, it is a political favor, but also economic favor. We know that Viktor Orban is a very corrupted leader, similar to Donald Trump. They are very similar in their nationalistic talk, in their pro-Russian talks, and obviously they have absolutely no morals, both of them. So that's why it sounds very similar, and they are friendly, they are meeting, they are promising some relief of the oil sanctions. Once those two leaders meet, that's what can be always expected. People without morals, without any ethical consideration will do exactly that. And it's nothing significant. Yes, it's true. Hungary is cut from oceans and sea. But the effect of that, Hungary buys some Russian oil, but that's not into the quantity of what China and India buy from Russia. All right, they might have some relief from United States. And we see also the counter favor. So there is always a bargain, which is that Hungary promised to buy more American oil, 6 were announced as a number. Exactly, these are dirty deals between two immoral leaders, and that's how I will simply qualify that, without much actually impact on the war in Ukraine. So these are empty talks, and we don't know what happened next week. Every week, Donald Trump meets another leader and he announces something in one way, and then next week it will be in the other way. So I wouldn't project much beautiful future for Hungary here. Hungary should worry more about what European Union and NATO.
Yes.
That's why Hungary needs to focus on it. Being isolated in European Union is much bigger damage economically and politically for Hungary, rather than a few good words they hear from the White House.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to focus on next. Of course, Hungary is an outlier when it comes to NATO and the European Union, particularly, of course, under Viktor Orbán's leadership. How could this sanctions exemption affect unity within NATO and the EU's sanctions framework and, of course, its unity as a whole?
Not much again. European Union and NATO are very united, and in fact, Vladimir Putin made them very united over the last 4 years. Never before they were much more disunited before the war in Ukraine. So European Union and NATO are acting together, doing the right things, and Hungary is much more isolated in both those organizations. So for that matter, exactly, there is not much impact of this announcement in the White House. European Union is strengthening its own security, but also imposing more sanctions on Russia, giving more support to Ukraine, and isolating those outliers like Hungary and Slovakia. And it's only Hungary and Slovakia. The rest of the European Union is absolutely very firm in their policy to Russia, to the sanctions and oil embargo and every other embargo. and freezing the Russian assets, supporting Ukraine with financial, with military means and everything else. So absolutely, the picture is very clear here. Hungary needs to worry about its place in the European Union. Donald Trump says one thing today and another thing tomorrow. That's absolutely no relief for Hungary. It may change. So Hungarians have nothing to cheer about today.
Okay, Professor Popovsky, thank you very much, as always, for bringing your insight, and thank you very much for taking the time. We now move on to West Asia for our next story, and the Israeli military has confirmed that the International Committee of the Red Cross has received the remains of another hostage in the Gaza Strip. The remains were moved into Israel yesterday and taken to a National Forensic Institute for forensic identification. If confirmed as the additional hostage, it would leave 5 more deceased hostages still left in the enclave, who are yet to be returned under the ceasefire agreement that began on October the 10th. Before this latest transfer, Hamas had already returned the bodies of 22 hostages. Moreover, in recent days, Israel has also received the remains of several others, including Israeli Americans and a Tanzanian student who was abducted last year. Now, as part of the same ceasefire arrangement, Israel has also released the bodies of 285 Palestinians. Authorities in Gaza say only 84 of those have been identified, with limited forensic resources making the process more difficult. Joining us to discuss this is Professor Rohan Gunaratne. He's an international affairs expert and he joins us live from Singapore. Thank you very much, Professor Gunaratne, for joining us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Of course, we've seen another hostage remains or possible hostage remains returned to Israel via the Red Cross. What does this tell us about the current state of the ceasefire?
Thomas, the key question that affected Israel was Hamas and its allied groups holding Israeli and other foreign hostages taken from Israel on October 7, 2023. So everyone has now been released alive. That is, total of 20 living hostages were released. And of the deceased hostages, Hamas is only holding on to 5 more bodies. So after that, it is very likely that the second phase will start, that is the disarmament phase of Hamas and 9 other groups that are located in the Gaza Strip. And that is the most challenging part. But I can confirm to you, as of yesterday, when one of the deceased hostages was released, only 5 remain, and that includes 1 foreign national, that is a Thai national, and the others are Israelis. The one that Israel confirmed that was released most recently was from Tanzania. So Israel now is focusing with the Americans and other countries how to disarm Hamas, that is the demilitarization phase of the Gaza Strip.
Yes, indeed. Professor Gunaratne, do stay with us. However, we will, of course, bring you all the updates in regards to that remains identification when that information comes through. We have a related development coming through once again, though. And Turkey has issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and dozens of other Israeli officials. The Istanbul Chief Public Prosecutor's Office says that a total of 37 individuals have been named in the warrants, which, besides the Israeli PM, also include other notable figures such as Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz, National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, and Military Chief Eyal Zamir. The charges include allegations of genocide and crimes against humanity linked to military operations in Gaza and the interception of an aid flotilla last month. Meanwhile, Israel was quick to condemn and reject these warrants. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar, in a recent social media post, has described the move as Turkish President Erdogan's quote-unquote latest PR stunt. Now, on the other hand, Hamas has welcomed the announcement, calling it a sign of support from Turkey's leadership. The recent warrants issued by Turkey follow the International Criminal Court's previous action last year, when it issued its own arrest warrants against the Israeli Prime Minister on war crimes allegations. Israel has reportedly rejected the decision as well. Professor Gunnar Ratner, of course, Turkey's position is quite complicated on this, as it wants to be part of that temporary governing body in Gaza. It wants to send troops in order to keep the Gaza Strip in check. How likely is this, given the fact that it keeps speaking out against the Israeli state, and now, of course, has issued 37 arrest warrants against some of Israel's top officials, including, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu?
Thomas, as you said, it's a very complicated relationship because President Trump enjoys a close relationship with Erdogan. But Netanyahu and Erdogan are constantly fighting with each other. If not for Erdogan, it is very possible that Hamas would not have started to release the living and the deceased hostages. Hamas was put under pressure by Erdogan. He has very significant influence, other than Egypt and Qatar, on Hamas and Hamas's allied groups. What is important to understand is that Turkey, under Erdogan, has been taking Israel to task for the civilian deaths. And that is why this warrant has been released. And of course, as you mentioned, the Foreign Minister of Israel has condemned it by calling it a political and a PR stunt. What is important is for there to be peace and harmony in the Middle East so that there will be peace in Gaza, because if Turkey and Israel continues to confront each other, then Turkey will not be permitted by Israel to participate in the international stabilization force in Gaza. So Americans are working very hard to keep Turkey and Israel as friends and not as enemies, although this most recent act by Turkey of issuing a warrant of arrest against Netanyahu and his colleagues is something that Israel is very angry about.
Yes, Professor Gunnar Ratner, a very interesting update, and thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. It's always a pleasure to have you. We now move on over to the United States for our next story. And as the longest government shutdown in US history enters its 38th day, US President Donald Trump has urged the US Senate to stay in Washington until a deal is reached to end what he called the Democrat shutdown. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said the Senate should not leave town without an agreement and called on Republicans to terminate the filibuster immediately if no deal was reached. The lapse in funding has led to many federal workers missing paychecks and millions of Americans losing food stamp benefits, and could force airlines to cut up to 20% of flights due to a lack of air traffic controllers. Meanwhile, the US Senate has reached legislation that would resume paychecks for federal workers as Democrats and Republicans remain at odds over how to reopen the government. The measure received 53 yes votes to 43 no ones in the Republican-controlled chamber, short of the 60 yes votes it needed to advance. Let's in fact listen in to what Democrats and Republicans have said in the Senate.
This is what's happening. People who are terrified of what's going on. So we have this moment in time. We're ready to work through the weekend. We hope our colleagues are as well. So let's get to the table. I hope the president comes and meets with us. The amount of money we're talking about here is about the same as the money that went to Argentina. I'm not going to relitigate that, but it shows what we could do and why we could do it. So let's get it done. Thank you.
Are the Democrats deaf? Do they not hear from the people that they're putting in these situations? This is their shutdown. This is their Biden budget they're not voting for. They voted for this 4 times over the last 19 months, and now they won't because their far left wing tells them not to.
As of course the shutdown continues, air travel is, as we've said, being severely affected in the US. More than 5,000 flights have been cancelled over the past day, with flight reductions at 40 major airports across the country. Let's listen in to some nervous travellers who fear flight cancellations in the United States.
Well, I was really nervous before I came in just because I haven't gone on a vacation in like 2 years. And so I was a little nerve-wracked, but I was kind of watching on the news and watching social media. And so I felt a little bit better. And now that I'm here, I feel a lot better about it just because it's clearly A-okay. But nerve-wracked for sure, but excited for my trip too, so.
Joining us now is Rubinder Sachdev. He's an international affairs expert and he joins us live from New Delhi. Rubinder, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. The US government shutdown is the longest in history. It's now grounding flights and disrupting federal pay, as well as stopping millions of Americans from even being fed. How damaging is this politically for Donald Trump? And is that rhetoric which the Republicans are leading with in the Senate, as we've just heard? Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it is damaging to Trump, but what Trump is doing is that, he's putting the blame squarely with the Democrats. He is positioning and portraying it as that it's a fight he's undertaking on behalf of the American people and, confronting the Beltway crowd as the outsider, so to say, which has been his campaign and stance all through. So Trump and the Republicans are laying the blame on the Democrats. They're calling it a Democrat shutdown. So they're trying to, mitigate and in fact leverage, even gain, position points by blaming the Democrats for the shutdown, whereas the reality is that, yes, it's both of them who are to be blamed, in the sense that both sides cannot come to an agreement how the budget should be allocated, where should it be allocated, what should be the preference, and what policies it should, highlight. So that is the basic, conflict out there. But Trump is positioning and setting a narrative that it's the Democrats who are to blame.
Yes, Rubinder Sachdev, I'm so sorry. We have ran out of time. Thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. Pleasure to have you. Well, that is all that we have time for. Keep watching the channel for more news updates from around the world.